Hey, Tom, this is great. We are finally having a second conversation on this topic, what most people would think is lunatic to even discuss. But I think one's got to think big and one's got to think crazy. And that's what I love about this whole idea. And I'm really glad, Tom, that you are actually willing to participate in this
Thanks for that.
lunacy.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to have conversations with folks that get enthusiastic about big ideas and big things. And I think that energy is, what we're looking for in the world right now. We had such negative energy and challenges over the last, year and a half, and it's time to, I think, get people excited again. And I
Absolutely,
think that
yes.
the resilience people showed to get through the last year and a half in tough times. It's tough to show your excitement, show your enthusiasm towards something when you're going through tough times. And we're by no means out of it. I understand that, but at the same time, um, we want to celebrate life and celebrate all the things we have to be happy about. And so I think this, those are the bigger picture things that get me excited. And then when we think about space and the vast expanse and exploration, learning new things, that is all in my mind, all in the same, kind of ball of wax for me, which is, how do you get excited about why we're here, what we're doing, what our purpose is, and find other people that share enthusiasm and energy for life.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, you summed it nicely. But before we go further, Thomas, and like these calls are very much unscripted. We are trying to pilot this approach of open sourcing all our conversations, and we are learning as we go. As one thing we've learned recently is we should start with some introductions. So why don't you just share a bit about what you are up to with Spacely and things like that, and we take it from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so Tom Cook, I originally from Winchester, Virginia, which is on the east coast of the United States. I went into the military right after I graduated high school, and for an opportunity to go to get an education in a lot of different ways. And I was fortunate enough to get picked up to go to the Air Force Academy to get my degree. And right away, as I approached, that campus, you have a lot of big thinkers there, and it was my first introduction into people that were risk takers, that were big thinkers, that people that had been thinking about these really large ideas that were coming to a place that said, "I want to be part of something bigger than myself," and with these big challenges, I can't do it alone. I need teammates, I need peers, I need other big thinkers that are willing to share in these risks and efforts and rewards from it. And so anyway, that was my first kind of instance of, wow, there's some really great people out here in the world that are doing some amazing things. And I decided to stay in the military as a result of that, from all the connections I made, all the great work that we were doing in the Air Force, and we were doing a lot of work in space at the time. It wasn't the Space Force yet; that just came about, just recently. And so I was in the military for 24 years, working on space systems and seeing people think about what the benefits of space were, and got into systems like GPS and radar and infrared from space, a lot of different phenomenologies. And when I retired in 2017, I just started consulting. That's a kind of a typical path, for folks in our aerospace industry after they get out of the military. And when I was consulting, I thought that, hey, there's maybe different approaches here of how we can tap into people's expertise and energy, and in a flexible way where this is pre-pandemic, in 2017 and 18, where we said, hey, let's tap into the collective imagination and expertise of people, no matter where they are, right? In our industry, we have a lot of hubs here in the United States, in California and Texas and Florida and Washington, D.C. But there's really smart people in Minnesota and Montana and the Dakotas. And just because there's not a office there, or an opportunity there, I felt that for me, I knew what it felt like to move away from home to get an opportunity,
Yeah.
and moving away from what I loved in Virginia, to get access to those opportunities. And so for us, we were seeing, how can we provide opportunities in this fantastic industry and get more creative thought, more energy and enthusiasm about space, and tap into the fuller capacity of the country, and not just make it mandatory for someone to have to move, to one of those locations in order to participate. So that was really kind of the foundation of the thinking about Spacely, and saying, okay, as opposed to me building a traditional consulting business and having an office here in Denver, how do we build a distributed group of folks that are passionate, enthusiastic about space, and provide them opportunities through a digital platform, and creating an open talent marketplace through a free market model that said, hey, here are some really big things that we want you to think about or work on, and give you an opportunity, and also just awareness that those opportunities exist. Sometimes there's not even awareness that there's a problem to be solved. And so for us, we wanted to open that up a little bit, and put it out there on a digital platform. And that's how we created Spacely, and started in January 2020 with that idea.
Awesome, awesome. And it's got that very specific focus, isn't it? There's so much happening in the open talent in the future of work segment or sector, so to say. And what's great is you've got the sharp focus, and I think you mentioned anywhere in the country, but I'm assuming you're open to the idea of more global.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking big enough, to be honest, when I started this in January 2020. Um, but as we were getting our message out there, right, and I was primarily using LinkedIn as a mechanism, to see if there's anyone else that was thinking this way. And sure enough, I had a lot of folks from India, the UK, those two specifically, those countries, Australia, New Zealand. And I thought, well, is this, are these other countries that would like to tap into US talent? And what I found was it wasn't necessarily just that. There was also other countries thinking about the same model for their own countries, and tapping into the full capacity of their own countries there. And so we wanted to focus sharply on U.S. aerospace first as we were getting started. But as there's even from my military background, there's alliances, there's treaties, there's collaboration and partnerships, and including in the aerospace industry. And so we are not disregarding the global aspect of this effort for Spacely. Um, but obviously, as you're looking at open talent, there's challenges to address. And when you look at full-time employment models and traditional employment models, there's already friction that we're looking to resolve there. Here in the U.S., as folks look to try to work in the U.S. through visas or green cards, or coming over, as students, we do see a challenge there and friction point that both sides, again, of the interaction would love to resolve. Hey, I'd really like to work with a U.S. company, but I'm here on a visa, or I'm here as a student, and I'd like to stay a little longer. And if I can find employment, that would be great. And so there's those friction points exist in full-time employment models and traditional employment. So we're looking at, okay, how is open talent being assessed by all the countries, through regulation, through different laws in these countries, and how do we, account for that within our platform? And those are all very tricky situations, and they're very, different and diverse as you look across, all the countries that are out there. So, we were trying to at least get to what we think is a min viable concept and min viable product and a platform. But we certainly have bigger ideas here. And how do we get a collective and a collaborative environment that brings in all the folks that are enthusiastic, and not just in the United States, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is tricky, as in we are still, we say future of work, but it's really, it's here, but it's not here in anger yet. And
Right.
there are all these border issues and all those issues to be resolved, certainly. So that, no, I like your focus, Tom. I really like your focus. So let's go to the lunatic part of the conversation, which is what today's call was all about. So if you recall, we caught up It was a few weeks back, probably 6 weeks back, when I shared my thought of how about enabling the crowd to do something in aerospace. I have no idea. I've got no experience in space or any. I get excited by it, like most people do. But to me, I was looking for a moonshot, and we the reason, maybe it's worth clarifying why we need a moonshot in the first place.
Yeah.
This entire sector, the future of work, it is at its very early stages.
Mhm.
And we're going to go through a lot of resistance, the naysayers, and there's all kinds of resistance we're going to experience. Um, it's quite likely that the future may become, may disappear altogether. We may all slip back into old ways of doing things. I hope we don't. We learn from these things. But when you have moonshot, it enables people to dream big and think big, which is why, and space is a natural candidate for moonshots, literally the words in it. But the idea here is not necessarily to get a rocket off the ground, as in if we can get that, that will be brilliant. The goal is not do it tomorrow or in the next 3 months. It is more a 2030 vision. But the idea behind this is really, can we, or when we ask difficult questions to ourselves, what would it take to actually get a crowd to get something off the ground in space exploration? Now, it could translate into, if we are uh, not very ambitious, it could simply translate into a piece of code that ends up on the International Space Station, right? So that's a possibility. But I hope we achieve something more than that and use our collective conscience and creativity to see what it takes. And in the process of solving space exploration, my hope is that we will have come up with models and tools to enable us to solve the day-to-day problems that businesses and organizations and humans and everyone faces. How do we collaborate? As in, crowdsourcing is a great way to get talent to work together, but having a crazy goal like this actually just sharpens the tools a lot more, which is where I'm coming from. I wouldn't be disappointed if we never get a rocket off the ground, but I hope, I don't want to even entertain the thought at the moment, but it's something which is doable. If private enterprises can do it, I'm sure the crowd can do it as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and there's already been, many successes, through NASA and utilizing a crowd-based approach to solve, challenges, and whether those are really unique challenges that don't offer a very apparent solution, or try to figure out how to solve the challenge that is solvable, but at different price points and different economic areas. So we can say, okay, well, now we have opened up new markets, or we've opened up new opportunities because we figured out how to solve this challenge differently and more economically. So to me, it's multifaceted when you're looking at how are you going to solve complex problems through challenges through the crowd. And I love the idea of continuing to advance that idea and advance what are some of these things we can figure out, right? We do a great job, across the world, and I'm proud of our country for the enterprises that stand up, similar, like SpaceX, obviously. That similar idea that they have there of, hey, we're going to launch, and we're not just going to launch the rocket, but we're going to bring it back, and we're going to launch it again, and we're going to bring it back and launch it again. That to me was, an early moonshot in my mind. As I was looking in the early 2000s, I was still in the Air Force. I was in Los Angeles. I was hearing the team out there and Hawthorne at SpaceX, talk about this. At the time, there was no reusability concept, or there was concepts, but no one was really executing on those concepts or thinking deeply about them. And that company, SpaceX, brought a crowd, a small crowd, but people collectively together that said, yeah, that doesn't sound so crazy. Let's figure it out. And then, not only did they figure out something technically challenging with putting the rocket up and bringing it back down, but as a result of that concept of reusability, now you've also changed the economic model, and now you've unlocked, value, right? That wasn't unlocked before. And so to me, that's just a great example of how you get a group of people and, come together and solve, for a challenge, and it creates this multifaceted approach to other, to the next steps, right? And what we do in traditional full-time employment, if I go back to future of work concepts though, and marry these two areas together, is we say, okay, well, we're all going to be in the same company now, right? And I'm going to be, if I believe in this, I'm going to work for SpaceX. And that's great because SpaceX is hired and, has very talented individuals and very capable people. And they've gone out there and galvanized, folks around this idea that we can reach out and we can do this in a different way, in a different economic model, and push the boundaries of, our horizons right now. But where the future of work, I think, comes in is, how do you tap into the full capacity of somebody, right? So you have really incredible people at SpaceX. What if they're so incredible they have even more mental and intellectual capacity than they're providing to the company, right? And so what I feel like we haven't really addressed so far, and we can do through crowds and crowd-based challenges and future of work models, is how do we better tap into someone's fuller capacity that may be somewhat blocked by traditional full-time employment models, by just working on singular problems for a company, or just whatever the company is asking them to work on. And they say, we always use the example, obviously, of Uber. You know, it's a time issue, right? That person has additional capacity and time. They want to make extra money. Airbnb is the same way. They have extra capacity, not using a home. They want to make extra money. I'm looking at it from intellectual capacity. What if we're not actually tapping into the full capacity of the individuals because of our, traditional employment models? And how can we use these crowd-based challenges and crowd approaches and working on these really hard challenges to show that we actually have even a higher capacity than what our, traditional models have let us employ. So that's what I get excited about, because I think we really haven't even tapped into the full capacity of, the individual yet.
Yeah, yeah, and you're so right. As someone who's always been in the project delivery space, I know what it takes, what happens to the motivations. And if you look at the traditional models, a lot of the initial engagements with employees tend to be, oh, I need to get this project off the ground, and you get the right people with the right mindset for that project, and it works beautifully. The project gets delivered, and then the capacity is there, but it's not getting utilized, or the motivation levels go down. And I quite see as commonness or commonality in what you were saying, where there are people who are already there and their capacity can be enhanced further. But then there are people whose capacity gets created because they're getting aligned to work which is not exciting them, not motivating them on a day-to-day basis. And they're actually they have the spare capacity, but they don't have their teeth into very motivating things. And things that excite them, and things that would really put a spring in their step, I guess, doing the typical 9 to 5. So I'm a great proponent of future of work, and having a disaggregated way of working. There's absolutely a place for the traditional model. I don't think, personally, I think hybrid is the way. One's got to think at how you have retained skill sets as well. But then you also need to look at how do you actually tap into the limitless universe of talent that exists outside the organization as well, and how do you do those things. So it'd be interesting to get this conversation a step further. And last time when we spoke, we said there may be opportunity, not necessarily work straight on something really as complex as let's get a rocket off the ground. But it may be a mini competition. It could be just a fun thing that we motivate people to do together. It would be great to try and visualize what this could look like.
Yeah.
It's not something that we need to execute straight away, but it's important to start having those initial conversations.
Yeah.
Uh,
we've built a lot of tools within the Spacely platform that is focused on helping build community and collaboration. And what I get excited about when talking Dash is, you know, I just mentioned SpaceX as an example, right? And how Elon did a great job of, coalescing a group around an idea and a concept and then bringing them together and working together. And they are all, essentially in Hawthorne. Now they've obviously got some distributed capabilities and people working with them as well. But what I really like is seeing this distributed model that others have, gotten to employ to get work done across time zones, across countries. And I love the concept of, showing that, and I love your example of building and launching a rocket, and doing that in a distributed way, right? In a disaggregated way, where we're not aggregating all of the folks around the challenge here in Denver or in the UK. We're aggregating it around the platform, right? And then, at some point you have to pick a location to say I'm going to launch a rocket, right?
Of
So
course.
you have physical limitations sometimes. You have sometimes those constraints that you have to work around. But I love the idea of pairing, the space enterprise and the space industry with this distributed work model to show that, hey, you can solve if you can solve really complex problems like launching a rocket in a distributed manner. Well, there's other problems you can surely solve by this model, and we just prove that. And that's what we do anyway, even with traditional full-time employment models. Is our hope is that, having someone like SpaceX doing these amazing things starts to show other companies, well, not that your problem is any less important, but this is a really complex problem, and if they solved it, then that means that you have hope in solving yours, right? I mean, because that's really all we're talking about, is having hope,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That there
yeah.
are some solutions for some of these really big problems out there, and they're not, obviously we're focused on the aerospace industry, but there's other big, complex, thorny problems out there, right? That just are just wanting a solution. And so when you are tackling really hard problems and you're showing that you can come up with a solution for that, that gives us hope that we can move to the next step and solve a harder problem, right?
Yeah.
And so, for us, we're showing that, to your point earlier, there is absolutely a valid reason for the traditional model and the traditional kind of structure. But in this point about increasing capacity, increasing the energy, and the momentum toward, solving really hard problems, to me, it's that hybrid approach. It's moving this disaggregation out, opening the aperture to a wider lens, and to me, that also solves some of these other problems of working in a much more diverse, group of people, that aren't all just, wearing the same T-shirt in the same company, right? And how do you guys all, how do you everyone work together in that way, when maybe you don't wear the same company T-shirt, but you really have the same like passion for this really hard problem you want to solve together. And
Yeah.
if we can show how you can do that in a distributed, disaggregated way, then I think that can give people hope that we can work in a lot of different formats. And as long as we figure out how to come together, we can get some really amazing stuff done.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the trick is in asking the right question, isn't it? And saying, here's a complex question. As human beings, we're all problem solvers. We love solving problems. Uh, that's what we all like doing, anyways. Is it? That's what
Yeah.
human nature is. But how do you frame the problem such that it is a stretch but not a break? And that's the trick here. If we say in 6 months' time we want to launch a rocket, that's a break, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I hope someone says that's not a break and it can be achieved, but it doesn't feel realistic. But what would be a nice next stretch at this stage? And it could be, and it may be a problem, and maybe I need to reach out to Steve and ask him if there is something that NASA is really looking to do. And it may be something that gets done completely gratis, more as something that we can get a group of individuals to focus on, get excited, create that small success. It doesn't have to be big. It's just got to be a small success. It can be just 3 people. It can be 5 people. But it'd be good to just, unless you already have something that you are sitting on, Tom, which is a problem that you're aware of, and it can be at a conceptual level, especially in a distributed presence. What we can do is even have simple chalk and talk and say, look, this is how the problems could be solved. And it may be just a blueprint initially. But is there a problem like that that you're aware of, which we could say this is a starting point?
Yeah, well, certainly there's NASA's been putting out a lot of different problem sets for the crowd to consider, and there's a contract we're part of called NOISE, NASA Open Innovation Services, and there's 19 different vendors that are part of the program that have different models that NASA's utilizing to try to solve some of these problems. There's been payload delivery for lunar outposts, and all kinds of different ideas where they said, hey, we may have some ideas ourselves, but we just want to see what the crowd's thinking about as well, like, and bring those ideas forward. And and then not only bring the concepts forward, then try to show some validity behind those concepts. Okay, that sounds great, but technically, is it feasible? To your point about bending and breaking, because there's all kinds of ideas out there, right? But sometimes the hard sciences do get in the way, in our current understanding of those sciences. Sometimes there are limitations, physics, orbital mechanics, how we understand those things, and constrain us. And we haven't maybe broken through a certain technology that gets rid of some of those constraints, right? And so I think that's where NASA has just, to me, they have these projects, and you can go to various platforms. HeroX is a great platform. We've partnered with them. They have a lot of different challenges out there, and not just aerospace or space related, across a lot of different industries. Top Coder's been doing a lot of challenges when you're talking about, line of code. Top Coder's done a lot of great work, in bringing forward software capabilities, for space, and through a crowd, challenge approach. And so, but what we're showing is not necessarily, those are specific, instances of problems, but it's not so much focused on those problems as much as what we're talking about, which is how do you get after those problems differently? How do you solve for those? So I always like the idea of having a specific problem through the Spacely platform and saying, okay, our Spacely community is going to try to solve this, right? Just like the Top Coder community is trying to solve theirs, and HeroX is trying to solve the ones they put forward. And so I love the idea of us having one, and that doesn't mean, and that's what we've also said, in the open talent marketplace, just because someone's part of the Spacely community doesn't mean they can't be part of the Top Coder community and the HeroX community. Um, this is going to sound like a really strange analogy, but I always use this because it's how I think about it in my small brain, when I started thinking about how we structure things.
Yep.
And, when I was growing up, McDonald's and Burger King were the fast food places here in the United States where people would go and get a hamburger, right? Well, that sandwich was structured. You could ask for it to be different or whatever, but they were telling you this is what a Big Mac is and this is how it's structured, right? And then when Subway came along here in the U.S., it was a new concept where it was like, we aren't going to tell you how the sandwich is structured. You tell us how to structure the sandwich, right?
Yep.
And that's what I think. That's my analogy for work right now. Is we for so long have said this is how work is structured. This is how it is put together. This is what it looks like. In future of work, we're trying to figure out, are there different ways we can structure the sandwich, and what are those different ways? And so Top Coder and HeroX are showing their path of how they put structure into work and solving problems, and we're trying to do the same thing at Spacely. And so to me, it does come down to, we're trying to show we don't know what the sandwich looks like at the end. We just know by maintaining an open approach, that we have different ways to put the components together to get to whatever that sandwich is for whatever client or customer or problem that we're trying to solve is, which is going to be potentially different every single time with every person that comes through the line. You may have so many different iterations, and you may say, yeah, we both wanted a turkey sandwich, but there's a lot of different ways to make a turkey sandwich, and they're going to be unique to the individual or the problem. And if you don't have an open way to build that and structure that, then you're always going to get the same turkey sandwich. So I hate, I apologize for
I
that,
love
but
your analogy there. It's really good because it does two things. I think one is it shows two ways of solving the same problem, but also opens up the mind, especially in this area where the future of work is is not defined yet, in
Right.
my opinion. As in, we all have a bit of an idea of how it may get shaped. Uh, but I think there is a lot of work to be done. If we all just choose a heroics path or a top coder path, then we'll only have limited paths to go by. And I do like the idea of the next time I go to Subway, I think I'm going to look at sandwiches slightly differently, thanks to you. But that's good. So have you considered challenges that or challenges or whatever you want to call it, as in challenges automatically biases the mind in a certain way of doing things. But ultimately, what we are really saying is, can we get a crowd together to solve problems? And how do we do it in the most optimal way? And really, let's not label it at this stage. Let's call it the Spacely method for all we care right now. But have you already worked on some concepts that you think, yeah, this is something we can get off the ground? Or if you've got stuff off the ground already, then I'm very keen to align, as in what I've discovered as part of my journey on smalloutside.com is initially what started off as a group of people who did their job well, and John knows Joe and Joe knows Jane, that kind of collective. I started realizing that the problem is much bigger than the Jane and Joe collective. And equally, while our focus was purely technology initially, I don't want to keep it limited to technology only, because the same models can work in all different industries. Not necessarily every, but in a large number of industries, these can work. So I'm at this point looking to collaborate more. So if I can support what Spacely is up to, as in the whole idea behind Small Outside, there were two aspects to it. One was, how do you actually keep uh, entities small, teams small, businesses small? Because I know, as someone who's received services from small businesses, I find they're far more flexible, far more cost effective, far more quick to move on things, uh, and 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 they're very passionate about what they do. So, but there are some problems to solve as well, as in you don't get escalation paths and all that as well, which can sometimes be a problem. So those are the problems I'm trying to solve on the small business front. But the other side, which is the small outside, which is a bit at a philosophical and a metaphysical level, is more around, we all are small from the outside, but we have the power of the universe inside. That's my personal belief. And how do you actually enable people to see their deeper, big inside, if you like? And how do you help them challenge their thought process? So if Spacely is on a journey where you're trying to get models working, and if there are people who I can reach out to who are interested in doing something in space exploration, and get them to come to you and somehow connect, and we make some magic happen, that would be great. So,
That would be fantastic. Yeah, no, so, as we got the company off the ground, our focus was, getting to be part of the NASA team, and saying, hey, you have all these other models and, platforms that can help you. We are the ones that are trying to bring forward folks that have aerospace backgrounds, right? Have expertise, skills, but in our industry, we're challenged as well with maintaining skills, upskilling, reskilling. So it's not just about having people that are already smart in aerospace, right? It's also um, knowing that we have, if you just look at the economics of it and the business side of it, there's right now in the U.S. over 16,000 jobs that are space related, that are open right now, right? That pay very well, right? So we're beyond this minimum wage discussion, and subsidy, being subsidized by the government and not working. Those conversations are being held here in the U.S. But when you look at aerospace, your average hourly salary here in the U.S. is around $65 an hour, and average salary is around 125K. So those are way beyond the minimum wage, here in the U.S., and yet we still can't fill those jobs, right? Well, why is that? Why do we have very good paying jobs? Is it a mismatch of skills? Is it a mismatch of desire? Is it a mismatch of expectations? Okay, now even maybe what we consider white collar workers here in the US are also looking for flexibility that they saw during the pandemic, that they don't want to return back to, the office in a traditional sense. So, for us, we look at it and say, how do we make sure that we as an industry are open to all talent and all people that want to participate, and give them reasons and opportunities to participate regardless of what skills or talents they have. It comes back to what's coined as the passion economy. Who has passion, and take advantage of the person, to show them that if they have that passion, we can be a place that they can come and participate, so they feel they're fulfilling that passion. So if you're a data scientist or an analyst at Morgan Stanley, and you're making $500,000 there and a very good job, um, and you're not going to want to turn that down because you're making your great living, but you're really passionate about space and you want to contribute. Well, how does that person contribute if they have the capacity? And then how do we get access to that person's capacity, if they're employed full time at a very good rate, right? And so what I really want to do is show that this model can tap into that, and we can account for conflicts of interest and non-disclosure agreements, and all the other friction points that have just said, everyone can go back to your own spots. It's a lot easier to do that. And so I agree with you. I think if you start small, you can start to show, because if you start too big, you can just crush the idea automatically and say, well, we're going to have lawsuits because there was intellectual property stolen, and all these things are done, and someone was working full time here, but they contributed to the group, and they shouldn't have contributed what they contributed to, and now there's some type of legal issue. What NASA's doing right now, which is very exciting in my mind, is saying, what can I get for $25? And it's not a race to the bottom to just cheapen everything and cheapen the work that's being done, but it's to get to those points of what can we actually you know get at a micro level, right, and build up from there. And so, okay, now we've done a micro task or a micro purchase, and again, we're demonstrating how, using a new framework and a new structure, that we can get some return on that, right? And so, we would absolutely want to do something. But again, I agree with you. I think starting small to show people that it's not a threat, right? It's not, and we're not trying to steal state secrets, or we're not trying to steal, IP. We're really just trying to tap into that capacity and that passion, and solve some, and show that we can solve really, challenging problems. So let's start small. Let's start with something that says that if we fail, we've learned what we can do and can't do so far in that. It doesn't mean we don't continue to progress. But also, if we fail, there's not an immediate economic impact, or a legal impact as a result of what we chose to take on. And starting with a micro task, a micro purchase, we feel that's a better way, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to ask someone from Google and Apple and Morgan Stanley and SpaceX to come join us and do this. Well, it can get kind of hairy quickly, as the word gets out that we had this great SpaceX engineer, solving for this problem. So I prefer to say, let's do something that's not encroaching on traditional employment models, that shuts us down quickly, and gets us, kind of off the path of what we really want to do, which is just showing that this disaggregated, structure can actually, solve for things. And let's start small and start there.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Tom, if there is an opportunity here to, because sometimes even defining the problem can be hard, right?
Yeah.
So if we were to go with, the model quite often in education, you use it, which is, here's a case study. People know what had happened on the case, the outcomes were known, how it was dealt with, but then they still give it to students to then try and solve it again, and they come up with a different solution. Is that something we're doing? As maybe we look at something, one of the NASA challenges from the past,
Yeah.
we never submit it to anyone, but we say, look, this is what we are trying to solve again.
Yeah.
And how would we go about solving it differently if we were to? And maybe is that solves a couple of things for us straight away. One is it gives us selection to choose from, because these things are real challenges. So there are a selection that we can really pick from, something which is of the right sizes, and you will be able to gauge whether what the size is of the problem based on your own experience. We take that and we say, look, there's nothing, there are no, as in there's no reward at the end other than job satisfaction. There's no job here, but how do we actually? And yes, you will make some good friends along the way, and to me, that itself can be very valuable, because even right now in this conversation, I'm learning quite a lot, and those are the kinds of benefits that people don't often talk about. But if we pick up one of the past challenges, in my head as a delivery person, my immediate thought process is, what is the next step? What could be the next immediate step that we could take? Would that be, so what do you think about that idea, picking up from a
I
bank of
love it because, what I like about it, what came to my mind as you're saying that right away was this aspect that I mentioned before of building community. I like bringing forward, a challenge and saying, well, how would you solve this differently? And, using the collaboration tools and the community features we have in the platform, then we can say, wow, yeah, we weren't picked, to solve this challenge. But wow, that person really has a good idea. Maybe they have good ideas about something else, right?
yes,
And
yes,
and you start to make connections, just like you and I made a connection and have this conversation. I didn't know you until like 6 weeks
yeah,
ago, right? So and it's fantastic, and I think that's what the value of this can also bring. Another benefit to society, that we're creating additional connections. We're creating additional ideas. We're sparking other things, relationships, new thoughts, and where we can say, well, what we really want to get to, I think, as well, because I think this is a challenging time in human history on, actually having differences and being able to resolve those, right? Okay, well, as opposed to saying your idea is stupid and it's just like, I think it's better for us to say, well, that's very interesting, why did you think that? And then you really also get some insight into that person's capability, their skills, their enthusiasm, their passion, and that's a side benefit, a major side benefit in my mind. And that's why we actually built a lot of the community pieces up front for Spacely, because we wanted to increase the number of those collisions, increase the number of those interactions. And we know even right now, if we don't host a whole lot of challenges for NASA, we're still trying to at least build new relationships, and that we hope that there may be a second or third order effect or opportunity that come from that. So it may not be solving this challenge, but I've made an introduction, we've created a new interaction, and now as a result of that, two people that know each other now can solve something that they weren't able to solve before because they didn't know each other. So I love the idea of bringing them together in our community, and just starting to begin to build relationships, in that open approach. That's one of the things I think that's going to be really challenging in a digital economy. And we saw this during the pandemic when a lot of things went to move online, was still maintaining that sense of community, right? So how do I get a sense of community with a different culture in a different country, right? That has a different background. And the more we go into a digital environment in a future of a work scenario, the more I think community is going to be important. And so what I think, one great thing we can learn from this too is, well, okay, we tried to solve this. What did we not have that brought us together, or what kept us apart as we're trying to solve this? What did we not have available, or what can we use that improves our ability to communicate with one another? Right? We've learned a lot over the last year about Zoom and Teams and collaboration tools. I love some of the other companies we've talked with that aren't focusing on necessarily the tools, but the context that's behind it, right? Like, what do we? It's great that we have all these different tools, but a digital, commute can be just as dangerous as a physical commute into work. And when you're trying to set up a digital environment to be able to collaborate, and especially globally, right, on tough problems. So, some of these things, like you said, it's not just about solving the problem, it's how you're going about it, the processes, improving processes, or coming up with new ideas on process, and having a place in where you say this is an area you can feel safe, right? That we're gonna, you may be challenged, but at the end of the day, it's not about challenge for the sake of competition. It's challenge for collaboration, and how do we improve each other based off of sharing that information and sharing our time with one another.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you're absolutely right about the networking side as well. As in, if you have a common problem that we can all focus on, the camaraderie around it is very different. Just bring people into a general webinar, it has no meaning. It's like people come, people go. But if you give them a problem which they all are passionate about, you see some bonds forming very quickly and those bonds will last a very long time as well. So you're absolutely right about the community aspect of it. And to me, it's more the process, the tools, the methods that we actually employ, which we can then use in other contexts as well.
That's
Because
right.
to be honest, to solve, as in, I don't know if I mentioned my other moonshot, which is how do you actually get a crowd to collaborate to build an Oscar winning movie?
Right.
Now, whether it will ever win an Oscar, again, that's not important. That's detail almost in my head. But you need something to focus on. Because again, that's the other industry. I used to be in the media industry, didn't quite get to movies, but we used to make ad films and things like that. So I understand that industry to some extent. But from when I was involved to now, you could easily use your phones to to shoot some real good quality videos, and then use simple editing on your little desktop and actually do some real great movies if you wanted to. But how do you actually get use the technology which has become so accessible? How do you now solve the human problem of collaboration? Because technology is there, how do we now find the methods to get people to collaborate and do something much greater than we are currently doing? And to me, those are the ideas that really excite me, not so much the actual Oscar movie or the getting rocket off the ground. So, but to me, if we solve, even if let's say we say, how do you actually get people to collaborate across geographical boundaries and cultural boundaries in a space problem, the same will apply in an Oscar movie problem. And the same will apply if I was doing it for my client on a business site somewhere. So I think those things are very real solutions. And to me, that's the great output really that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I love it. I agree. And you think about multinational corporations, and they have multiple locations across the globe. Well, what are they trying to solve, and why are they in different locations? And why can't you say that technology now has improved your ability to collaborate across boundaries? And I always talk about artificialities, right? The way we've structured society as a whole right now, I don't want to sound like I just want to throw it all out, because I don't. But there's some artificialities that we can say and at least question, hey, is that boundary necessary? Is that constraint necessary? And from a technology standpoint, we've shown a lot, of progress, in my lifetime at least, of okay, that was a boundary, or that was a constraint. Now we've solved for that, whether through technology, or process, or people, or whatever. And so I love the idea of how do you bring various people from various backgrounds together, and not say, okay, well, you're in the US, so you're in this US based one, and you're in our China shop over here, and you're in our EU shop here. It's really it'll be an interesting way of how people come together in communities again, whether we've seen it as countries and borders in the past, religion and churches, neighborhood watch communities. There's always this sense of I want to belong, to something, right?
Yeah.
And we always like the idea in space of, okay, do we think that we belong to something bigger, right? And
Yeah.
so when we get people together, no matter where they're from, we're all on this little blue planet together, right?
Yes. It
And so
changes
that's
the dimension, doesn't it? Very
yeah, it
quickly.
does, and that's what I love about us looking at this, and I totally agree with you. I think that if you look at it with that dimension and that perspective, then you say, okay, this other stuff is also achievable, and that's there's been a lot of talk about the pros and cons of billionaires going to space. Recently, obviously, it's created a lot of news recently, but what if you don't try to expand the horizon, expand your knowledge, it's I've said to a lot of folks, it's not to me, at least personally, it's not about a billionaire on a rocket and getting a joyride in space. it's, what are those after effects and after opportunities that come from it? And we've all talked about, all the astronauts that have been able to go and see Earth from that perspective and the value that they gain from that, right? And we see that, when we travel, we get to see new perspectives, new ideas,
Yeah.
shared cultures or shared interests, and say, oh, well, we're actually not so different after all. And in space, from what we hear, that for those of us that haven't had to enjoy that same perspective of looking down on the blue planet, I think that does truly give us that opportunity to say, yes, we can have a shared effort and a shared perspective because we're all here together. When you look down, there's no borders, there's no differences. We're all on this, spinning around planet and, hanging in the vast expanse of space together.
Yeah.
And that's stuff, that's why, I'm personally invested and personally excited about, working with other folks that share that passion and enthusiasm about us just being hanging, suspended in midair here and
But,
together.
but there is a natural progression, isn't there, Tom? As in, if we trace back in time, there were village communities, and then
Yeah,
you suddenly villages, and then you become very you have a special feeling, and you start looking at your state, and then you say my country, and then you the next natural step is my planet.
my plan. Yes.
It's got to be that way, really.
Yeah.
So, as in, I've always considered myself a world citizen. I don't consider myself as, and of course, I've got a British passport, but that's what I need to exist on the physical planet, I guess. But
No, I mean, I can say this, I love my country. I love my community. I think we can say that, right? And still love other, all the communities we're part of. If someone's part of Colorado and they're part of the United States, and they're also, to your point, of villages, they're also part of a neighborhood and a church. You can love all those communities simultaneously, right? The two
absolutely,
part.
yeah,
And
yeah,
to
yeah.
me, it's just in a digital environment, we're just trying to also build digital communities that hopefully we can fall in love with and find one another in as well, and coalesce around as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm very conscious you've only got 4 more minutes. So I think what would be good to do is maybe offline we'll need to catch up on what could the next step be. But it
Yeah.
feels like maybe let's just pick one thing and then get our teeth into it. And let's see what that one thing could be. But let's get our teeth into it. Maybe we talk about it both on the Spacely platform and the Small Outside platform,
Yeah.
and see, let's galvanize some energy around it and see where this goes, really.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to hear the response. I saw you had a great response from your last call, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what other ideas are out there too beyond you and I, I'm
Yeah,
excited to see how this continues forward. Yeah.
absolutely. Tom, so do you want to just mention to anyone who's watching who's managed to come up to this point? I think deserve to know how to get in touch with you if
Yeah,
they
if you've
need
stuck
to.
around this point, I appreciate it for sure, and I'm glad that we'll put a plug in at the end of this thing, for Spacely. So we're at www.spacely.work. It's free to join. You can come in and create a profile, and there's already communities that are built. You can build your own community and invite folks to it, or join. There's opportunities there to post and respond to folks. We're just getting started, really. Us two, just like this idea you and I are sharing, Dash, is in its infancy. So please, we're more than happy to have folks, start to, contribute in their own way, and participate in their own way. And we want to try to make it as easy and right now, we just want folks to show us that they are interested in these thoughts, right? It's nothing more than that, as we're trying to show this kind of viability behind the concept. So yeah, spacely.work, it's where we reside, and hopefully we can start to increase the interactions and the collisions, in our digital environment there.
Yeah, yeah, perfect, perfect. And it is Spacely, Ley, not Ly, right?
It's Spacely.work.
Ly, not Ley. Okay, good to know.
Actually, right here,
There
I
you go.
wore my
That's the way to do
today.
it. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I'm on smalloutside.com. So smalloutside.com. Great stuff. I'll hit the stop button on this and put it online at some point soon.
Sounds great, Dash. It was so good seeing you again.
Right. Cheers, then.